right. This, okay, I just double. I'm hearing myself twice here.
So with regards to
Okay. I think hopefully I'd be good to go. Please use the chat for some of the questions we're going to go in. I think everybody kind of here knows me, or if you don't, you'll be able to look at this. Let's move to the next slide, please. Great. So, if you could just throw into the chat for me, would help a little bit. How do you consider data to be your most important asset? How do you define that? And why is it important to whatever institution that you work at here at the UC? If you could throw that into the chat for me, just so I get a little sense of where people are coming from. Okay, let's move to the next slide, please, and I'll kind of read those along the way. When I talk about the data explosion and this era that we've moved into of digital everything, sometimes I hear people use the term data is the new oil, and I actually really don't like that because I don't think it really represents. We have data everywhere, and I like to talk to people about the concept of, please move to the next slide, is that what we're really talking about here is are the way that we navigate throughout the world, the way that we interact with people and things is more and more being enabled by technology. And technology leaves a signal, a digital signal, and a digital signal is data. And one of the easy ways I explain this to people is like, look, when you hurt your knee and you go to the doctor and they say, we're going to do an MRI, they put you on that MRI machine. That's a piece of technology. But the doctor doesn't use the technology. The technology asks the technology to generate an image, and they make a diagnosis on the image. And that's the data, right? That's why data is the most important asset. Data is the value proposition. And so this is, as I talk about with, what I'm responsible for at UC Irvine, what I really try to get people to talk about is, look, the value proposition for what it means for our students, for what it might mean for our patients, for how do we support faculty is actually in the data, and the technology enables it, supports it. But we really need to focus much more on the data. And that was one of the main reasons why, I asked for data and technology to be in my title, to be within my responsibilities. We're in this period right now of AI frenzy. Everyone's going crazy because of the introduction of Chat GPT, right? But these technologies have been around and evolving for quite a while. The fact that you put it into a context where the average person can interact with it and feel like it connects to it, much in the same way that Netscape did the internet for those of you on the call who might be from way back when. AI, it's now, if you're not talking about AI as part of whatever company you're a part of, you're just not in the now, right? So everyone's talking about it, but I like to reframe it in terms of two things. One is I like to talk about AI as augmented intelligence, meaning we are not trying to replace human beings. We're trying to make human beings better, whether it's the way they interact with people, the way they're able to make decisions, to create more robust experiences, or maybe take the mundane and take it out of the inbox or out of the to-do list. And so it's augmentation rather than artificial intelligence. And I'm trying to reframe this for us as we think about what is this going to mean to us at an institution of higher education, where we educate students, where we do groundbreaking research, where we take care of patients, and we're part of the public service ecosystem. And I also try to talk about that. Look, when you look at this technology and data, kind of continuum, this augmented intelligence takes on a lot of different things. Computer vision represents the analog of you using your eyes to watch me on screen here. And now, because we record it, it's now something we can compute against, where to date, we've never figured out how to compute against the human brain other than what happens inside, the way the brain works. Apologize, I'm at the airport here. But think of all the ways in which things that used to be in analog form are now getting translated. And these are the list of things that I take people through, is everything from the way that we perceive things, the ways that we analyze things, automation allows us to complete tasks without human interaction or, human energy being spent. Our ability to communicate now being facilitated. These are all digital data streams that we need to think about. How do we, generate? How do we harness and collect? How do we combine? And how do we actually think about new value propositions to them? Next slide, please. And so the new economy value chain, as I talk about it, and I'm showing you slides that I talk to our leadership at UC Irvine about, that I talk to other UC leaders about, that I'm asked to talk to other institutions and companies about, is that, this value chain built around data. Data is not intelligent. Data is just amassing a lot of things. Structuring it into information is something we've been doing for a very long time in the IT field. But how do we turn it into knowledge and action-based decision-making? How do we actually generate insights from the data is what we've been talking a lot in the last 5 years about. Is it's not just about having a report, but can it help me make, a better decision tomorrow by looking at the past and the patterns over time. And of course, if you have the ability to make better decisions consistently, that's when you start talking and using the term like wisdom, right? And so when you talk to companies that are really kind of data driven and really understand this paradigm, they'll use, some type of language around this of how data ultimately gets into, the ability to make better decisions tomorrow in a more consistent way, faster and faster, and ultimately at scale. Next slide, please. I'm not sure that I can see questions because I'm in Zoom and you all, I think, are on a platform, but is there any question right now? I think you're all muted, so I don't think you can ask questions verbally, but I'll see if you throw something in the chat if I can see it.
I can read to some of the things that people have been commenting on. I tried to answer your earlier question.
Okay, yeah, that would be great because I'm not exactly sure how this is supposed to work, but I'm coming through a Zoom window, and I know most of the participants are coming through the CVent window, so I'm not sure how I'm supposed to be able to see their questions.
Okay, so here's some statements about data. It allows for more effective decision making. It's pretty hard to do data-free science, so in that sense, it's fairly critical to our mission.
Absolutely.
You only know what you can prove, and you can only prove it if you have data to support it.
Hey, let me just jump in on that one phrase that someone used for me actually many years ago, right? Trust in God. Everyone else bring data, right? And I like to use that only because I think it's a little bit comical, but it also is like, it does send a message about we can sit and we can wave our hands about our budget, or we can bring data and talk about our budget, how we spend it. And I'm really an advocate for the latter. So thanks. Yeah, keep going for me. Thank you.
3 more. Data is vulnerable and can be biased in ways that other assets aren't.
I love talk offline with the person who gave me that about. I would like to argue that humans are far, very fallible, and the biases that we use in our everyday thinking just gets represented in the data. So let's not blame the data for something we created first. But yep, keep going for me. Please connect with me offline. Love to have a conversation on that one.
2 more. Data is used every day for decisions, and it needs to be accurate. Last one is, one of the ways that data is different from other assets is the difficulty in assessing its value. And
yeah, absolutely. But if you look at what's going on with companies, and you look at valuations of companies, and how many of them have a quote unquote data strategy in them, ultimately the data is very valuable, and that's one of the reasons why companies are generating the market capitalization. It's also one of the reasons why, because of the inequity of where the value is being generated and where the value is being consumed, it's one of the reasons why things like privacy becomes such an issue, right? Is because there is kind of this inequity that people are feeling around who should be benefiting from the data that is getting collected and used in today's world. Great, excellent set of questions. Let's keep rolling because I know I'm going to run out of time very quick. And I think most people, know how to connect with me offline, but please throw the next slide up.
Working on it. Give me a second.
Okay.
Where did it go? Oh, there. Okay.
Okay. And I want to talk next about kind of the context, a little bit about how I think our role, and if we have some time to get some comments from you, how we think our role is going to kind of evolve in this. I mean, we've always been very involved in deployment of technology, and if technology really is just a data generation device, right, or application, we are and will be involved, and I believe in meaningful ways in kind of the data revolution and the data-driven economy and the augmented intelligence economy that I believe is coming at us. But I don't think really things have changed. I like to talk about headwinds as technology. We always are kind of fighting uphill. I tell people if they want to be a chief information officer, enjoy the process of pushing a boulder up the mountain only to see it roll back down. If you don't like that analogy, don't try to become a CIO, because your days are filled with that type of a set of activities of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Next slide. And so we always face a lot of headwinds in terms of this, right? Was talking about this actually with the group at South by Southwest, as some of the people know that conference, is, the headwinds are really the same headwinds that we've been dealing with for decades of trying to get technology deployed to do things better, faster, cheaper, right? Which is people have old habits. I've been doing it this way a long time. I don't necessarily trust the new thing. I don't believe it's actually going to be better for me. Maybe I can sense some risk. And these kind of old habits and antiquated paradigms. And I think we also have to check ourselves on our paradigms. Anyone who's been interacting with these new generative AI tools, I think if you really have been kind of doing it, your paradigms will be shaken. I can tell you mine have been shaken at seeing how far some of these things have evolved in terms of being not just really cool, but potentially really, really impactful to transform the way things work in our world. Next slide, please. And so, another challenge that we have, and I think, for those who might be on, I know we got a couple people from UCI on the call, institutions, John O'Brien did a great job talking in one of the keynotes on this, is, we are built around, the concept of lanes or pillars or whatever paradigm you want to use. And we've become this kind of horizontal across the lane player at our institutions. And it doesn't make a difference if I'm talking about a campus or a medical center, health system. IT and technology is now so pervasively deployed to touch every aspect of what an organization does. We have this vantage point of really having the ability to be a part of every piece of the operation, every interaction. And so what that means is as those interactions are not just enabled through technology, but the data that gets generated, it means we're going to be very critical in the conversation around how do we bring this data together? How do we have data shared across these pillars when people tend to think about, this is my data. It's career services. It's our department's data. Not true. It's the institution's data. They have those types of conversations every week. And so, a lot of this kind of how do we get people across the enterprise to work together is something that is going to, I think, take the next level up for us in terms of what we do as professionals. Next slide, please. So a little bit about what's our role. Let me roll forward to this, since we're going to run out of time, I think, pretty quick. Next slide, please. And as you think about kind of your role, because I'm sure there are people from not only many different locations, but also many different things that you're doing at your locations. Just thought I'd share with people kind of, in my kind of higher level role, how I talk about what I'm trying to help the institution do. Right? I don't put it in a context of I'm the IT person. I put it in the context of I'm really trying to be a catalyst for what it means to be a research university with, a health enterprise in the 21st century. And it's in an era where technology is everywhere, data is everywhere. Data is the key for us to becoming a better institution for whatever it might be that we're trying to do, whether it's in the field of education, patient care, research, our community outreach programs. How do you, what's the role, that we play? And, behind me is an incredible set of roughly 900 IT professionals at UCI who really make it happen every day, right? But my job is to try to put some structure and strategy around, what it is we're trying to do in context that's non-text specific. So I talk about, it's like, look, we need to use technology strategically. There's broad belief of that amongst the leadership across UCI, but also now transformatively. We need not to just think about how it impacts the mission. We need to think about how it impacts the mission 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And I can tell a story about how our Department of Medicine chair, who had me at his retreat, was asking his faculty members to think about the future of medical education when your med students are walking around using ChatGPT on how is it I'm going to, make the next decision around this patient. And those types of things are really happening. We validated in the conversation, those things are really happening now. It's not a futuristic scenario. It's happening with medical students today, right? How do we really get people to think about the data value proposition, right? Maybe it's in the form of better decision-making, more consistent decision-making, but it also might be that same data element is allowing us to generate new revenue streams, new relationships outside of the university, new connections to cross-pollinate across different types of disciplines where we're trying to get people to work together, where, how they work together is through the data. You have data from your field, I have data from my field. The technology teams help us put it together. And now we're looking at a fused data field that we've never really had to work at before, where your expertise and my expertise generates a third level solution, right? And then of course, and this is going to be, I think, a big theme for us and why I've been talking about augmented intelligence is we can't forget the human element in all of this. Technology is changing faster than the changes that we can really absorb, think about it and absorb and put into practice. And how do we align our ability to use some of these advanced tools with our organization's ability to really absorb it, internalize it, and take advantage of it, and not fear every time we want to deploy the new thing, right? So we have to really keep it very humanized. And as we deploy it, look at things that people have brought up earlier, like how do we ensure that there is not bias in how we have kind of structured this thing and rolled it out? Right? How do we deal with the fact that people's jobs are going to continue to evolve and change? And that's scary for a lot of people. How do we, put the scaffolding around helping them deal with that is just going to be a reality. The years of that nothing has really changed around here in the last 10 years is just not a future that is going to exist for any of us. Next slide. Right. And so when I talk about kind of the data value proposition, you may, if you're from UCI and maybe from other UCs, you hopefully have heard of this thing we call the collaboratories at UCI, which is really kind of a way of framing how we're putting data to work to create those new value propositions. Sometimes it's getting different research teams to be able to work together. Sometimes it's how research and the living laboratory work together, right? So we don't just practice medicine, we create medicine for the future. And we don't just create medicine for the future, we figure out how to bring it into the practice at the medical center, right? So, the concept for the collaboratories is how do we bring all this data that's being generated together? But more importantly, how do we wrap the subject matter expertise around data? Because data alone is not valuable. Data, in the hands of subject matter experts who understand this context, who know how to generate the right question, who can think about adjacencies that maybe they couldn't consider before because they only had their data, but now they have their data plus others' data. This is what the collaboratory concept is being used for. And again, if you're connected to UCI, you know about our Compass initiative, what we call data-driven student success. Talk about the collaboratory for health and wellness and our play in the healthcare space. We're now really driving through the collaboratory concept, our whole model for how we plan to innovate at the university and bring technology and tools and data-driven decision-making into play, right? So the collaboratory concept has become kind of a central way of thinking about how do we move things forward. Next slide, please. And so just a couple real quick examples. I won't spend a lot of time on this, right? But in healthcare, we talk about this explosion of data coming from different sources, but it's also coming at different speeds and different formats. If you think about the average, well, maybe not the average patient, right? But more patients have electronic medical record, they have lab tests, they have medical imaging, maybe a genomics profile, they're bringing from 23andMe, they've got wearables now. You know, you got crazy people like me who, you know, track their food and nutrition through an app and then throw that at a doctor. So you have this kind of what we call in healthcare multimodal data environment. Next slide, please. And so our ability to build a longitudinal, deep understanding of an individual around, around who they are through data for the purposes of helping them manage their health and helping the medical professionals they interact with make the best decisions in support of their health or their recovery to health, is something that has become a very, very data driven, and sometimes terms like precision health, precision medicine issue. We are moving away from the clinical trial said that 200 milligrams of this particular drug for this particular disease condition, it works and it's safe. Well, that's wonderful, right? But that's the 50th percentile on that distribution curve. I want to know how much of the drug I need. And based on data, we should be able to say, Tom, you might, we think you only need 120 milligrams of this for reasons X, Y, and Z, right? That's more precision, right? Not treating every patient the same, but actually becoming more precise in understanding you as the individual, your condition, your timing and background, and how to treat you. Next slide, please. We're not just doing the UCI, but we're part of a collaborative across the UC system where we do this with the medical records of all of our patients. This is something I was involved with when I was at the system-wide level before I came to Irvine, that we call the clinical data warehouse. And so what we're doing here at UCI is I'd say a little bit more granular, but it's something that is very much part of the kind of the UC thinking of, at least from a healthcare perspective, where healthcare is going. Next slide, please. Now I'll jump over to, we talked about maybe the patient as one type of, individual that we take a lot of ownership and we, support and serve in a lot of ways. Let's talk about students, right? At UCI, we have made a commitment to be very data driven in the way that we think about student success for the future. We're really putting a lot of effort into kind of really defining what that means, bringing together institutions to talk about that together. We had the Waypoint Summit in March of this year to really kick off this conversation. It's one in which, if you go back to the pool slide that I have in the lanes, my job has been to basically remove the barriers between those lanes and get groups to work together. For us, that's enrollment management, it's teaching and learning, it's student affairs, it's career services, it's student health. All those players are at the table really helping, trying to figure out in a similar context, how do we think about a holistic and longitudinal understanding of the learner and through data? And then how do we use that data to more personalize the way that we support them to reach their goals while they're at UCI? They might be educational goals, that might be one goal on the list, but there might be other goals as well. And so how do we think about, the overall experience of our learners and people who've touched the UCI community through data? At the same time, that data that we collect and are using is very useful to our researchers who are asking the next question, and what they learn, creating a pipeline for how we bring back a better practice for how we, quote unquote, support the student in their journey to success at UCI. Not just our data, but there's lots of opportunities to use external and environmental data, right? In healthcare, they call that social determinants of health. Social determinants of education is not really a term yet, but there's a lot of things around the context of the individual that, quote unquote, let's say are headwinds or tailwinds that really, kind of set up an environment, and a journey that is set up for them to be successful or might make it more difficult. How do we think about the context of that data and bring it into our equation? Next slide, please. And so we're still trying to come up with the right picture, right? But, we at UCI pride ourselves as being, a university that's been recognized for doing most of the American dream because of the diversity of the student populations that we bring in and the amount of support we give them to succeed. We're a leader, as many of the UCs are, because of the diversity of the population of California that, when I talk to institutions and I show them the diversity of the student population here, it pales and, it really exceeds what most universities are dealing with around the country. And then, really trying to explain to them that, data, we're trying to use data in a very kind of strategic and transformative way, not just in an incremental way, but really rethinking the whole way. If you think about something, if you're studying this space or following stuff in this space, the idea of personal navigators that are going to follow each student is something that is starting to evolve because these new technologies are starting to be deployed. These large language models or foundational models that you can start to build, really the ability for someone to ask a question, confront a situation where they're trying to get around some hurdle or barrier, and that it's there 24/7, very, very kind of well educated and curated to support my needs, right? And so how do we think about that precision orientation taken out of healthcare, and think about how do we do that for each learner that's at our institution? Next slide, please. Maybe I'll pause for 1-2 minutes here. I see that I've got just about 10 minutes left. Are there any questions that people want to throw at me here?
There were some comments before. We can wait a minute for new questions, then maybe move on. Or do you want the comments from a few minutes ago?
Yeah, well, let's send them in from a few minutes ago. That'd be great.
Okay. Let's see. One more on what data means in the age of generative AI revolution. Data is the new currency more than ever. It was before as well, of course, with stuff like user metadata, but now it will be the most important factor for how the work is being done because it is what drives these models.
I have to agree with that statement. Yes, very much so. And I don't think we even truly understand that statement. I heard one executive say, we're 3 steps into a 10K race. And I think I actually buy into that kind of paradigm. I think that there's a lot in front of us. And I'm, at least from a UCI context, really pushing that we need to create a lot of small experiments to play with these new tools that are coming out, just to learn and understand them before we start really defining ways that we're going to deploy them. I think you have to experiment and learn before you understand these things. And I think as these things more mature, every week I read about ChatGPT is old news. Here's the new news, that's coming out. And so I'm for a lot of experimentation at this side, and I've been, testing that with a lot of my colleagues. Thank you for the comment. What else we got out there?
Another comment, if I recall correctly, OpenAI said they'd have to start ingesting private data to grow their model since they've captured everything publicly available.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I also had a very interesting conversation this week with the colleagues, someone who I have a lot of respect for and seek their opinion out about, the open source movement around these models, right? And, should an institution like ours, given our mission, our public mission, should we be really orienting to work first with the open source movement that's happening around these models? And, I put it in the back of the brain, that let it roll around for a little bit, talk to some other colleagues about this. The first resonance was, that makes a lot of sense for the type of institution that we are. Thanks for the comment.
And one last echoing above, as AI systems reach that level, you're correct that data is the new currency.
It is. It really is. I mean, we've been saying that for a while. I think the difference for me is, if you think about it as water, right? Water's everywhere. It's even in the air. We have to think about, how do we channel it and put it into context where we can use it? Because what I see in a lot of organizations, including the one that I'm part of, there's a lot of data that hits the ground and never really gets harnessed for use. And, let's just call that lost opportunity, right? And so how do we start getting people to really think about, every time that we try to answer a question and we realize we don't have the data we have, we got to work backwards and say, did we generate the data and just not hold on to it? Or did we not harness it and pull it into the data warehouse or data lake or whatever we might be working with? Or as we deploy the next technology, are there different types of data elements that we want to generate and capture, or go back to end users and have them start putting that data into systems? That's a big thing in healthcare right now, finding some of the data gaps that we need for the problems that we want to delve deeper into for insights is actually data that we could be capturing in systems, but we're not filling in the fields. And that becomes a training issue for the people using that application every day. All right, let's move on to the next slide. well, a couple minutes we got left. A lot of slides that we have in the deck, and I'm sure we're making this deck available, is just, there's a lot of scaffolding around these concepts I'm talking about in terms of how you build the environment where data becomes more democratized and people are supported to figure out how they might answer the questions that they're tasked with today and the questions they should be thinking about for tomorrow. How do you create that type of environment? It's not just about creating a data warehouse. It's really about building a set of tools and scaffolding around it. And so we've been at this for, a handful of years, in my role here at UCI. And this is just, for example, how do we do it in the healthcare context where we have lots of different data sources that are part of our data ecosystem. We have a kind of a storefront concept for people, whether it be a researcher or a practitioner. Sometimes they come in and know exactly what they want to do, what data they need, how to work with it. And then the other people who I got an idea in my head and I need someone to work with me because I got to flush it out. I don't know if we have the data. I am not expert on the tools. So is there someone I can tap into to join my team and work with me because I know what the answer looks like. I don't know the process to get to the answer, right? So this concept of concierge services or storefront, we call it the storefront, in the healthcare context, we've got navigators and explorers that we've developed, that we're branding on our student success initiative. You got to build a scaffolding around the data. It's not just about putting the data in the data lake and saying, hey, we're ready to go. Next slide, please. And also when you want to talk about balancing, democratizing data and using it, and to people, is it the right thing to do to give people access to that data? As one of my colleagues said, the questions of could we and should we allow the data to be used in that way? Keeping it in plain English, you need to have processes in place, processes around data governance, data access. These are all part of that scaffolding. And again, we're spending a lot of time. I feel like I'm both cheerleader and cop at times in my role. I'm the one pushing we need to be aggressive in our use of data to create good. And I have to set up and manage the governance process around, should we be using this data? How do we do it in the most appropriate way? Is our relationship with that third party and how we exchange data with them appropriate for the institution? What type of guardrails do we need to put around those relationships? So I really have to play in the good cop and bad cop realm in my role. Next slide, please. This is just a slide from one of my colleagues at UCI, Astrid Reed, who runs our community of practice, right? So it's not just about putting data in data lake, but how do you build what we call a data culture? A set of people who are no longer just kind of throwing stuff into spreadsheets, but actually using all of this aggregated and curated data. How do you build them to take advantage of the more modern tools? And that's not a given. You have to really put together a community of practice strategy, a way of really upskilling your organization to be able to actually take advantage of this data. I'm sure some of us can think of examples where we've put a lot of data in the data warehouse, thinking if we build it, they will come. And all they really want to do is throw data back in a spreadsheet, not take advantage of any of the investment that you made into building a more structured data asset for them to take advantage of, right? So we recognize that, and we've got a lot of activity and thoughtfulness thinking about how do we build this community of practice. Next slide, please. Let's skip to this slide. Go next slide. I think we've evolved to the point where we're thinking about, kind of this concept of the collaboratories and actually having a service catalog, right? So this is our first attempt of trying to put a service catalog around the types of services. So we've got the data, we've got the platform, we've got the tools, but how do we think about the services associated with, this data economy? And can we explain them to people? Can we define them? Can we explain them to people? Can we think about where self-serve is going to be prevalent or where we need to provide the scaffolding? And so this is just kind of how we, thought about building a concierge service, or what we might usually call a service catalog approach to. I'll just point you to the bottom, like some of the things that maybe you don't think about. It's like, we do grants. You have to do things like data certification letters. Do you want every research team trying to figure out how to do that? Or do you have a central service saying, sure, we can just put that together and quote unquote, kind of certify that, this is what we're going to do around protection of the data or data preservation. So it's just a lot of things when we start getting into this world you can think about doing to make the use of data and people to come to you as kind of a service for the institution to take advantage of. Next slide. Hopefully, I think this might be my final slide, but any questions popping out right now? Because we're just about done.
No more right now.
All right, jump to the next slide real quick. I know. So this concept of data, right, and what I call the collaboratories at UCI, just to show you that this is not a one and done thing. It's not a one in space thing. It's really evolved into a playbook that we customize for different types of, let's call them domains or spaces. So you heard me mention here, health and wellness collaboratory, student success collaboratory. I mentioned just very briefly this concept. It's called the hub. It's really our platform for how we drive ideation and innovation. And then the campus is going to go big on sustainability and climate change. And we're now branding something called the data biosphere as a collaboratory to support the research around sustainability and climate, and also how we bring it into the living lab, which is our small campus, or small city campus in Med Center environment. Next slide.
Each station shall run in numerical order.
Next slide, please.
While any passengers are able to bring 2 bags or 1 hour.
I apologize for the background noise and the 10-minute late start that we got. You all know how to reach me. Comments, questions, we love to get them. Also love to continue conversations and help your campus or your medical center, think about how to take advantage of this, because none of this is unique to UC Irvine. Obviously, all campuses are thinking about this, doing things, and the more that we collaborate, or as was said this week at UC Tech, the University of Collaboration, collaborating around data is a very, very powerful thing, and we'd love to see more will happen at our institutions. So I'll leave it there for today. I know I'm in the last session of the day, so if you haven't traveled home yet, safe travels. And for everyone, thank you for being a part of UC Tech. Is the session host still out there?
We are still out here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Who am I talking to? So all I get is session host on the.
I'm Greg Calls.
Hi, Greg. How are you? Thank you so much for figuring this out on the fly. I'm sorry it was such a screw up on I'm not even sure. I was looking for the link, couldn't find the link. We found a link, and then it seems like it was not the right link because I came in as a participant.
Yeah. No problems. We had about 52 attendees was our high count. Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty good considering it's like the end of the event.
Yeah, for sure. And good information too.
We did what we could do. All right. Well, I think we're good. You all are making the slides available, right?
They are. There were questions about it, and I posted the link title and confirmed that they were there.
Okay.
So all good.
And most people in the system know how to get a hold of me. So, I'll certainly share. I hope people do contact me because I'd love to have some conversations with other locations. Appreciate so much your all support, and you all did a great job this week. I thought it was a fantastic event, and everyone I talked to was just very jazzed that UC Tech is back. So thank you for making it such a great event.
Okay.
All right.